In a recent interview, Andy Burnham has ruled out proportional representation before the next general election.
I stood for Westminster 4 times under the first past the post system. And then in 2017, when I stood for the first time to be Mayor of Greater Manchester, under a proportional system, I realised that you had an incentive to knock on every door because you might be able to get a second preference from somebody who was a Lib Dem voter or a Green. And I used to say to them, oh, well, okay, if you support regulation of the buses, maybe you could consider giving me a second preference. And the thing about that was, it finally aligned the conversation on the doorstep with what people want from politics, which is about problem solving first and foremost, not point scoring. And for me, building a different political conversation in the country then allows us to start thinking of different long-term solutions. I think Westminster politics has served people very badly indeed.
Are we talking about electoral reform here?
I support it, and I think it brings
a different, ditching first past the post for a new system.
Conversation.
Okay.
And look, but that to then go on to answer your question would require it to be in a manifesto and endorsed at a general election.
Now, there has been an ongoing debate on whether the Greens should stand a candidate in Makerfield, and this latest development could potentially settle that debate. Now, on our last show, prior to these new developments, I think I was pretty clear. I was like, I don't think the Greens should stand. I don't think they can win. I still hold that position that they cannot win. Maybe do some sort of backroom deal with Andy Burnham for PR, or even for me, the logic was basically, look, I think Andy Burnham is the only person that could probably beat Reform at the next election. So this by-election isn't just contained to the by-election. It could have far-reaching consequences for the entire country. So that's where I stood. But I think these latest developments have really thrown a spanner into the works, not just on PR. In fact, this next one, which we'll talk about in a second, right, I think is even worse. And look, for those that oppose the Green Party fielding a candidate, I think they believe a deal could be struck between the party and Burnham to implement PR. Look, make me Prime Minister, right? And you'll get a fairer voting system. That bargaining chip has been lost. But it's this one, which I think is a big kicker. Burnham said this.
So, I've quite clear, let me say this really clearly, I support the fiscal rules. There needs to be a plan to get debt down. But beyond that, we need to change politics and take the turbulence out of British politics, because that is a cause of uncertainty that then has that impact in the markets. I'm proposing here a new approach to politics, like we've built in Greater Manchester, more long-term, more collaborative.
I am shocked at that answer. Not that I'm surprised that he said it, but I just think it's a really bad political move. If you're going to promise that you're going to be different to the Labour Party in its current form, then why are you saying the one thing that basically attaches you to the current project, which is the fiscal rules, is that you support it? He's been touting about public ownership, and now he's sort of saying public control. Maybe that's a euphemism. He has been centre-left coded and has done some great things for Manchester, and of course bringing buses into public control. I think a lot of people are expecting that Burnham is going to come out in favour of public ownership. How are you going to do that if you want to stick to Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules? I mean, that is the worst part of this government. There's many issues with the government, of course, but the fiscal rules. And you're basically saying, yeah, no, I support the fiscal rules. Then how are you going to be different? Seriously, how? Look, I think I didn't buy the arguments that the Greens should stand a candidate based on moral arguments. Oh, it's not fair, and they should be allowed to stand everywhere they want. I'm concerned about logical arguments, and my logic basically said, look, the Greens cannot win. I still don't think the Greens can win. But these latest developments has given, I think, logical arguments to the Greens potentially standing now, because Andy Burnham, it seems like, is going to be no different to Keir Starmer. Now, I do think he will move the party slightly to the left. That's maybe another conversation we could get into, or whether he can even do that. Maybe I do think he's to the left of Starmer, right? But whether he can actually do it because the party machinery won't let him do it, that's another thing too. But to say you want to stick to the fiscal rules and then rule out PR, essentially, then tangibly, how is this not another Keir Starmer running in Makerfield? Barry, I think I know your thoughts on the Greens standing a candidate. I guess I'll ask you, these latest developments, do you think before he kind of said, oh, no to PR and the fiscal rules, that you could understand the argument why some people were like, let the Greens go for mayor, maybe try and take the mayoralty, but not the seat because it's dangerous. And now transition to today, where he's like, we like the fiscal rules and we don't like PR. It's given credence, far more credence, that should I say, to the Greens standing a candidate. What are your thoughts?
I get it. Of course, I get the argument that the Greens should step aside, but I'm really uncomfortable. I'm really uncomfortable with that kind of politics in general, especially when you are in a country that effectively only has two parties of government, right? When you're in a country that's a duopoly and all you have is a choice of one or a choice of the other. And I think it's fundamentally disrespectful to the electorate for a party's position to be, or a party's pitch to be, you have to vote for us. Because if you don't vote for us, you get them. Right, which is the same thing that we saw with Kamala Harris in the US, where, we saw a lot of people on the left saying, I'm not going to vote for her because she supported a genocide. This is a woman who slapped down Palestine protesters when they stood up at one of her events and said, sorry, excuse me, I'm speaking, and wouldn't even let them talk. We saw that there. It's a type of politics that makes me uncomfortable, especially when you're in a situation like you are in this country right now, where you have this movement that is leftist, because Labour isn't anymore, and that are building some excitement behind them. And then you say to them, no, guys, just stand down, because now we have this soft left guy coming in and he might be... Again, I get it logically, but my heart can't get behind it, right? And I think about for the Greens themselves, there's all this excitement. They're going to be different. Here we have Polanski. I have all these policies that I'm really interested in. The electorate is saying, I agree with this. Yes, bring on a wealth tax. And then you see them step aside for Burnham. If you're like a devout, dyed-in-the-wool new convert to the Greens, how does that play for you also? But again, I agree with you. They have no a chance of winning. But that takes us to the proportional representation thing, because you are right in that is the biggest thing that the Greens could have got out of this if he didn't U-turn, right? Because I personally think that this country should have a system of proportional representation. And the argument for that has never been stronger, because now we have a significant number of voters voting for reform. We have a significant number of voters voting for the Greens. We have Labour and the Tories. There's also another party everybody's forgotten about called the Liberal Democrats. But, we have like an electorate that is much more fragmented now, right? And so what happens with first past the post is that a fragmented electorate is not well represented in Parliament. He's talking about a system here, even when he talks about electoral reform, called supplementary vote. Supplementary vote is not proportional representation. Not to bore the turn left audience, probably know all this really well.
I want to know, actually, because I don't understand SV. It's SV,
yeah, so,
right?
Supplementary vote is just a political system by which people get a second vote, right? So you vote for your preferred candidate and then you vote for your second preferred candidate. What happens is, if no one candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, the top two go into a runoff. If your first preference has not made it into the runoff, your vote goes to your second preference if they have made it into the runoff. That's it. You still get one person elected. What it can lead to is a sort of a more collegiate politics, right? Because politicians have to be thinking, I need a second too. So like he said, you go on the doorstep and they say, well, I'm not going to vote for you. And you go, hey, maybe give me a second because of if you like what happened on the buses. So it makes it like in a way kind of less aggressive. That's one argument that people make for it. But that is not proportional representation. I know a little bit about this because in Ireland, we have an incredibly complicated system called PRSTV, which is proportional representation, single transferable vote. Now, I'm not going to take an hour, but let me just quickly explain how that is true proportional representation. And that is because every constituency has between 3 to 5 MPs. Right? In Ireland, we call them Chocta Dolly, TDs. So every constituency has 3 to 5 TDs, unlike in the UK where it's 1 MP per constituency. So in the constituency I grew up in, we had 5 MPs. And that's related to the size of the population. You go into the voting booth and you have, as you have here, you have the list with all of the candidates, but you have to do numbers. So you start with number 1, number 2, number 3, and you can stop at 1. You can stop at 2. You can stop at 3. Or you can, some people say, I'm going to work the entire paper. That's the thing people say in Ireland. They go, oh, no, I work the entire paper. So if there's 15 candidates, they go to 15. And what happens in that system is that there's a quota. If somebody misses the quota, then all of their votes are shared out. All of their votes are shared out by preferences. If somebody comes over the quota, then they have supplementary votes, then their preferences are shared out, and so on until you get 3 to 5 people elected, depending on the constituency. What that should translate to in the parliament, because of the multiple representatives for each constituency, is a makeup in parliament. It's called the Dáil in Ireland, that is close to representing the popular vote. I'm sure I explained it really badly. So go and look it up, people, if you want to know how it actually works. Now, the benefit of that, obviously, is representation in Parliament. The argument that people make against it is that it leads to unstable governments. We have seen that, in which, there have been governments that have fallen apart. We had one coalition that was called the Rainbow Coalition that was made up of so many different parties. It was like, how is this ever going to hold together? But have we seen stable government in this country recently?
No.
Right? So I just think when you look at the political lay of the land here, and you look at now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parties who people are supporting, it's anti-democratic not to have some form of proportional representation. And what he's proposing, supplementary vote, is not it.
Yeah, I can't pretend that I'm some sort of guy who knows a lot about electoral sort of voting systems. I'm not going to pretend. I do appreciate you breaking that down. Another reason actually why I was very skeptical of a Green candidate was the spoiler effects, which is that they will be blamed for being a spoiler candidate. And I thought, like, going forward, it could make the Greens look worse, especially if you're trying to court ex-Labour voters. And in Gorton and Dent, there were many Burnham supporters who voted for the Greens because he wasn't on the ballot. And if you're seen as the spoiler candidate and the Greens are seen to have handed a victory to Reform, whether that's even true or not, I feel like that would create a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. So that was also kind of part of my reasoning. But I am finding it harder to justify my position, given PR is, again, that annoys me. But I think I never expect PR to happen before the next election. Maybe I'm skeptical here, right? But the fiscal rules is far more immediate. So that, to me, I'm like, I don't know if I can justify my old position. I guess I'm going to have to sit with it, if I'm honest.